Listeners, friends, family, everyone tuning in. Hey, we have a really special opportunity. Brad and I actually got the chance to record an episode on the More podcast with Nikki Dutton, which is fantastic. She's actually our producer on this show. So if you need somebody to produce your podcast, she is amazing. But she recently interviewed us and we had a great time. We thought we'd get an opportunity to just share that with you. So, Brad, anything that they should know about Nikki and about the episode that they're about to listen to?
Yeah, guys, we are going to post that episode here. It will also be on the More podcast, and we hope you guys enjoy it. It was a lot of fun to reflect on this journey with Nikki. She's been an integral part of our team, and she is the reason why the Daily Leader made it through season 1 and is looking into season 2 to kick off. So we thought you guys would love getting to meet her because she's such an important part of our team. And we also want to encourage you to check out the More podcast and enjoy the work that she's doing over there, because we do as well. So go check that episode out. We appreciate you guys. Remember to get your Daily Leader tattoo. Like, subscribe, share with friends. See you guys soon.
This podcast is a part of the More Podcast Network.
I have two people on the podcast today, which it's kind of surreal because I hear your voices so much. I listen to every single word that you say on your podcast. And now your voices are here on this podcast. So I've got Brad and Taylor here today from the Daily Leader. You guys can say hello.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, Nikki.
Hey, everybody.
Our apologies, first of all, that you have to listen to us that much.
You know,
our wives would not enjoy that.
I do. I catch it all. I get to hear all the ins and outs. And so it's fun. And then Luke gets to listen to it too. So I feel like I am spending tons of quality time with you guys, when in reality, it's actually not. We haven't had a lot of time to chat. So I'm excited to have you here.
Yes, it's good to be here.
And Brad, you've been here before. So you were on the podcast back in October 2023 because our friendship goes a little bit longer. And then Taylor, you're brand new. So Taylor, let's start with you. Who the heck are you and why are you here?
Yeah, it's a great question. Who the heck am I? We can get really theological and deep with that if you want to. Yeah, I mean, I'm Taylor Jessup, friend of Brad McDonald's, for better or worse now for 7 years, Brad, I think, going on. So we have worked together back in the restaurant industry at Chick-fil-A. I myself have had a plethora of experiences, as I like to say, in my career, ranging from ministry, was overseas for a number of years, as a youth pastor for a while. I was an auctioneer. That was a fun career for about half a decade.
Wait, you were an auctioneer?
I was. Yeah, I did the
whole
bid calling.
When? What does that even mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we sold everything except livestock, essentially.
Okay.
So we did estate auctions. So, when people pass away, hey, what are you going to do with your stuff? So that, antiques, firearms, commercial equipment, restaurant liquidations, like you name it, that's what we did. So I did that. I lived in South Dakota for about 5 years and helped run, manage, and be the actual, they call it bid calling, when you're up front and doing the fast talking. It's been a while.
I was going to say, you're going to have to preview that on the Daily Leader at some point soon. A Daily Leader talent show. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it'll come out one of these days. But, got into restaurants with Brad, spent some time in real estate, and realized, and part of the reason I'm here is because Brad and I both have a passion for leadership. And really for me, I say this and people kind of make fun of me, but my hobby is people. I love people, and I love helping people get healthy and get the dreams that they want for themselves. Yeah. And so about 7 months ago, started a coaching business. It's called Bara Coaching. There's different divisions of our company. So we have Bara Agency, really huge into technology. We operate as like a fractional chief technology officer for a lot of real estate teams and e-commerce and all kinds of everything in between. And then we launched coaching, which is my real heart and passion. So I ended up on the show because, man, Nikki, you are amazing and have taken our show I mean, we would be nowhere without all the work that you do.
I was going to say the real reason I brought you here to puff me up and tell everybody publicly how great this is.
Yes. So if you're looking for a producer of your podcast, Nikki would be no questions the best that you can get. So
Thank you.
I was glad that Brad connected us all together, and it's been fantastic to work alongside you and with you and take your guidance and leadership on this. So anyways, long-winded answer, as you know from listening to all my answers, but that's kind of a little bit of
That's why we keep you.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
Thanks. No, that's helpful. And I actually didn't know a lot of that. Like I said, I get to, and I'll back it up a little bit. You guys host the Daily Leader podcast, which launched this time last year, right around the beginning of 2024. We just celebrated the end of season 1. Somehow, some way, there was an episode every single week of the year, which is crazy. And we did it. And I say we because I get to play a really small part. I get to help just keep the train moving down the track. So you guys focus on the conversations and the content, and then our podcast network just helps with the editing, the strategy, and the reminders of, hey, we need another episode next week, or you mentioned this guest in this conversation, you should maybe reach out to them for future. So that's kind of how the three of us started working together. And like I said, now it's been a whole year. And I realized, and why I thought this conversation would be interesting is because I talk to you guys every single week, multiple times during the week. And like I said, listen to every second of your show and realize that I haven't had a space yet to share that with the people who are a part of my life, friends, family, podcast listeners. So that's kind of what this is. But yeah, it's been about a year since Taylor and I met for the first time, which is pretty cool. And I did not know a lot of what you just shared, even after a whole year together.
Learning something new all the time.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Awesome. And then Brad, you have been on the show before, but there may be some people listening today that haven't met you yet. So who the heck are you? And how are you kind of tied into all of this too?
Yeah, well, it's very fun to get to be back on the More podcast. So thank you for having us.
Of course.
We met in 2012.
Yeah, I don't remember. 2012. I think that's right. Yes.
Yeah. It would have been the fall of 2012, I think. Mm-hmm. And obviously we met through Impact 360 and our shared connections to the Fellows program there, and then both worked together there and became friends and coworkers. Obviously, you're very close with Becca, who's my wife now we just celebrated our 10th anniversary. And
so
I'm very close to Scott, your husband, who's a very close friend of mine, and he's a stud. And please tell him I miss him. And Scott, if you hear this podcast, just know how loved you are.
And I do want to say, in the same way your wives don't listen, Scott loves every part of what I do. He does not listen to my show either. So it is okay.
It's a spouse thing.
It is.
It's a spouse thing.
They're living it. They don't have to listen to it. Yeah.
I told Becca the other night, I was like, Taylor and I talk about you and Janelle on every single episode.
I've mentioned it to her. I've said, that you get name dropped. Yeah.
And she was like, but I mean, do you actually want me to listen to every episode? And I was like, you do not have to do that. I understand.
Yeah.
You have 3 children at home and
right.
Yeah. There's not a lot of time to just plug in the AirPods.
Yeah. I get it.
But really in my heart, yes, I do.
But yes, it would make me feel really good if you would.
But please, if you don't mind, I could never ask you to, but.
Right.
So yeah, that's us. We've got JJ, Heidi, and Honora at home. Honora just celebrated 8 months. Heidi's 3, JJ's 5. Everyone got pink eye this month. So there's that.
Some of them got it twice. Yeah.
Some of them got it twice. Some of them got it more severely than others.
Yeah.
So that's the life we're living right now. I'm the founder of Pattern Talent, co-founder and co-host of The Daily Leader along with Taylor. And, we're really passionate about developing leaders. And from probably an early age, I had the privilege of being exposed to great leadership. And so did Taylor, through the church environments that we were in, sports environments we were in. And we've just had great people in our life invest in us and mentor us. And then when we worked together at Chick-fil-A, we had this window together into a very, very well-run small business that was a part of a much larger ecosystem and brand that also happens to be very, very well-run. And so through, those shared experiences and many others like Taylor mentioned, I think we're just excited to bring compassion, I think, in understanding to the struggles that leaders have, whether those are at home or at work, and to try to provide solutions and encouragement that will help people lead more effectively and with more inspiration and deeper purpose. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I'd kind of sum up me and what I'm up to and what Taylor and I are doing with the Daily Leader. We have some verbiage that we use around all of those things that I'd love to share with you as well. But that's the essence of it. And that's what we're excited about and hopeful that the Daily Leader will have that influence and impact on people.
I mean, I think that's what makes your partnership so unique is that, and I was actually talking with Elise about this when we recorded yesterday. I remember when Elise texted me and she said, "Hey, I think I want to start a podcast. I think I want it to be about this." And at first I thought, well, that sounds really similar to what I'm already doing, and there can be this, I guess this kind of, is it competition? Is it collaboration? Are we working together? And that's what's interesting about the partnership between the two of you is that you're doing very similar things, but in very distinct ways. And there's so much room for both, and there's so much opportunity for both. And I find that just really interesting. And then actually when you bring those two things together, then you can have more reach in the personal mission or the professional mission that you have, because now you're getting to do that alongside someone else. And you still have very independent tracks, but then kind of this Daily Leader is what keeps you guys together. And I find that super interesting. And I would love to know too, because I think you both have some specific language around this of what your personal mission is or what the why is behind what you do. You do coaching, you spend a lot of time and resources on this podcast and this community, and you guys are both serial entrepreneurs, always starting something new. There's always a new group or a challenge or, something new. What is it that, or I guess what would the words be that keep you moving towards those goals? And we can start with you, Taylor. How would you articulate the why behind what you do?
The why behind what I do. Well, man, the easiest way probably for me to articulate the actual why, not as much the verbiage, but the why is, I had my life a number of years ago kind of come off the rails, both, a little bit, very much personally and, professionally really made me pivot. And I had the opportunity in life to slow down and get healthy. And I know that not everybody has the time. I had, half a year to just focus on myself. And so my why became wanting to give the transformation that I have to so many others who maybe don't have the time, money, energy, or effort to go, hey, I'm just going to pause life for a year, or may not even see the need. So my why is helping people, coming alongside, partnering with them for transformation in their life to achieve their goals. That's what I love to do. And so that's kind of the bigger, broader strokes. And then if we get into like the specifics and the details, it's all the same in business. Wanting transformation in whatever they're doing to achieve the vision that they have for themselves and the goals that they have for themselves. So I know that life can be really, really hard. And I think if we're honest, like if we're actually honest, it's way harder most of the time than maybe we even let on. But I love getting messy with people. That's my favorite thing. That's my favorite thing. So that's kind of my heart, and my passion is really like transformation at a core level. And I believe that healthy humans can have healthy teams, and healthy teams can lead to healthy businesses. That's kind of the premise of the whole deal. So that's my why in a nutshell.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And that resonates with, I think you said, your story. I think that's where we see a lot of these missions and these visions birthed, and then they grow and they develop as we start to see the rubber meet the road of how we can actually help other people achieve those things. So you have one conversation that you see actually set someone a little bit more free or unlock something new in them, and you start to realize maybe this is actually something that God can use to change the lives of the people around me. So I think that that's awesome. I think that's huge.
Thanks. Yeah, I spent a lot of time in the Celebrate Recovery world. If you're not familiar with it, it's a Christian-based 12-step program. And I like it because one of the sayings, they have a lot of cheesy sayings, and my wife would say, "You're really good at cheesy sayings." Thank you. I'll own that. Is like, hey, your mess will become your message. Right. And you can take that in there and go, okay, alcohol, anxiety, depression, sex addiction, whatever it is, name that. But I think that is really true, is that like, if you allow it, our greatest source of pain can often be where we're going to actually produce the most in life for other people.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I've heard it said too, that crushing can produce that fine olive oil, or it can produce that wine. But there is this process of crushing that often happens. And sometimes the crushing is intentional and you're leaning into something tough. And sometimes it's just life. It's just being a human on planet Earth and existing in this world, and that can really crush you. But there can be something very valuable produced from that if you're willing to take note and to kind of lean into that direction. So I think that's so encouraging for a lot of people, especially at the start of a new year. It's not like our whole life resets on December 31st, but there is something about a new year. Yeah, there's something about it. So I like that. What about you, Brad? How would you articulate the why and just kind of what keeps you moving forward? And I know for both of you, something I thought a lot about is the risks that you take. And we were talking about this before we hit record. These risks have very real price tags of starting your own business and stepping out into, something brand new. So what kind of keeps you moving forward on some of those things, especially when it gets tough?
Yeah, this is such a fun topic, and risk in particular is very interesting to me. In fact, my previous employer is a mentor and friend of mine named Aaron. I remember one day we were talking about a particularly difficult deal that he was working on as a commercial real estate deal, and he said, "Brad, risk is a spiritual principle," and like, without getting into details, like if you knew the number of zeros that he was referencing, like when he was talking about that, you'd be like, yeah, this is like God better be real sort of moment. Right. And he better like me as well. I better be on his good side.
Yes.
And what's interesting is when you have someone else's money in particular, like in the context of business, a lot of times we're talking about money, right? When you have someone else's money, it's a function of stewardship, right? Like, okay, I'm stewarding someone else's money. It's not mine. Therefore, ... When you're stewarding your own money, right? Which, from our standpoint, like, as with the Bible as our guide, we understand that like all of the good things that we have in our life, including our financial resources, are a gift from God. The fear and the anxiety and the implications around what happens if things don't go the way that they're supposed to, like, i.e., there's no return on that money, right? It just feels differently. The weight sits differently. And I think for some people, it's probably heavier when it's someone else's money. And for others, it's probably heavier when it's your own. But that's really what the last year has been like for me. It's been feeling how the weight of your own financial risk sits differently than the weight of someone else's financial risk. And it's still risky either way. The risk calculation is no different. It's just, where does the pain and the suffering and when things don't go well, where does it land, right? Where does that weight sit? And so I think that it's important to just like recognize, as scary as that downside risk is, we also have to measure upside risk. And that's something that we oftentimes don't talk about when we talk about risk. We don't talk about what happens if I don't do this.
Yeah.
Right. And so for me, there became a little bit of a different weight in late 2023 when I made my transition out of my full-time job to do this coaching thing. and consultancy in the podcast, it was what becomes of Brad if Brad doesn't take this risk? Yeah. What becomes of the people that Brad has the potential to influence and be of use to, of service to, if I don't take this risk? And that weight and that downside risk became scarier to me than the financial implications, right? Which, thankfully my kids aren't, old enough to know what's happening with dad's money right now. Right. But my wife certainly
Becca
knows, and she's feeling those tensions, as a newly as a mom of 3. And so, but we're also experiencing the benefit, the blessing, and the joy of making a real difference in the lives of anywhere from, 40 to 50 people at a time who we're working with. And in addition to hopefully the people who are experiencing value from our podcast. And so I think that the upside risk is where we need to put our attention, and we need to look at, hey, what can happen if we go take this risk? Like what's possible? What new future can we create, and how can we help the people that, will benefit from it? So that's something I would offer up for us to consider with risk. I don't know if you guys would add anything to that. You've both certainly taken risks as well in the last year that are different. And I just think it's important that we talk about the upside as well as the downside, when the downside is the part that we're always drawn to that fear and to that anxiety and to the what ifs. But like, what if it works? Like, what if this daily leader thing works? What if Pattern Talent and Bara Coaching and more, what if these things all work? And what if we actually change just a small part of the world for the better? Yeah. Like, what are we going to do? What's going to happen then?
Yeah. What do you do if it works? Yeah. Well, and I think I have a unique perspective on this because I've been a beneficiary. So about this time last year, and it would have been a little bit before because we did some planning before we actually launched the Daily Leader. But I remember I was on a work trip in California for the nonprofit that I was working for at the time. And you and I had briefly talked about this podcast network, you maybe having a podcast. And at that time, I had a ton of people who would ask me all the time, and you guys might be starting to have this too. When someone knows that you have a podcast and that episodes actually keep releasing somehow magically, then they ask you how to do it themselves. And what does that look like? And and you're like, it's not actually what you think it is.
This is going to suck for you.
It's actually very different. It's not as widespread as it might sound, even though it sounds really good because we have a great producer named Luke. It is, it's kind of small behind the scenes. Yeah. And so I remember you and I had a phone conversation, and this was at that point when you were making that change from kind of your steady 9 to 5 to this dream and this mission of I want to empower leaders, and this is the goal that I'm going after, and this is how I'm going to do it. And I was laughing yesterday with Elise because whenever you were talking with me, I was not really ready to launch the network, but you were ready to launch the podcast. Therefore, the network had to launch for the podcast to happen. Correct. And it all happened. I remember Googling how to write a contract, or what am I supposed to do? How do you build an invoice? All of it kind of happened at the same time. And I think that I have gotten to be a beneficiary of that because you guys pay me every month, and Luke, to make sure that this show is releasing, and really without any promise of we're going to get you this many listeners. We never promise viral. It's great when that one social post goes viral, but
Thank you. Yes.
it doesn't, the return on investment is it's different. And we'll talk about that in a bit, but just, I think, to make that comment that I've gotten to be on the other side of you taking that risk and investing in someone around you, because this network wouldn't, I don't think, be here if the Daily Leader hadn't launched. And there were a lot of months, especially the early months, where it's like, what are we doing? Is this right? Is this wrong? We still don't know, really. But here we are, a whole season in, and I think it was worth it. So thank you. If I haven't said it, thank you to you both for actually making this thing happen.
Yeah, our pleasure. That's what we said at Chick-fil-A. It's our pleasure.
Yeah, exactly.
Nikki, I mean, I'm just so glad. I'm so glad that you took that risk. I'm so glad Brad helped nudge you over the edge, and yet you still had to take the risk. And Brad,
That's
I go
right.
back. Sometimes you do ask some really good questions. And I wrote that one down. What happens if I don't do this? And that was like penetrating to my soul of like, yeah, what happens if I don't take the risk? Like, not even ROI, but what happens internally for me if I don't take the risk on myself to see where this goes? Like, I just wonder, Nikki, in your situation, like, hey, I wonder, like what would have happened if you didn't take the risk?
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Clearly, the daily leader in our 500,000 subscribers
Yeah, the
is
millions
just
and millions that
raking
tune
the
in
cash.
every Tuesday. Yeah.
You guys, all the people that, they all listen within the first hour that it drops too. It's
There's
amazing.
Joe Rogan, and then
Yeah.
there's the daily leader, and
Yeah.
it's just
And then
pretty big.
Andrew Huberman's down
Yeah,
there
Andrew
somewhere,
Huberman,
whatever.
yeah.
He's okay.
Yeah.
But really, you took that risk. I just think that's a great question to flip it on its head because, like you said, Brad, as humans, we like instinctively gravitate towards fear and staying safe.
Totally.
Or as we've talked about on the podcast, perceived safety. Like maybe not even what is safe, but what I perceive to be safe. And truthfully, we're probably no safer. There is some risk, right? Of course, you could lose some money, you can get embarrassed. But like life or death wise, I think it makes more sense to take a risk on ourselves than it does to not, even just the intrinsic value. So anyways, both of you, I'm grateful for the risks both of you are taking because, Brad, you've spoken plenty of life into me too and challenged and encouraged me and are always like, why are you not doing more? You need to be doing more, not less. Like, take more risks. Like,
It's the name of the network.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah,
More.
it is the More Network. There it is. I mean, and you guys you both challenge me so much because, like I said, I get the opportunity to listen in as you're kind of working through things. And it's been pretty incredible to watch this last year, what started as this podcast and has now grown to, and this is kind of what we can talk about next, is now growing into this community. It's this bigger thing. It's this whole space for leaders. It's not just something that you tune into, that we just are filling space on a Tuesday with, but it's actually growing and changing. And it's been really interesting to watch as you guys have started to move more in that direction. And then you guys, you freak me out. You do all these, you change things and you start things. And it's like, I can be a very consistent person. So I've got this beautiful season laid out for us. And then it's like, well, what if we do this and we add this and we change this? And so, I mean, it's been so encouraging to me to watch you guys do that and inspiring to me because the two of you are a lot more like Scott than I am. And so, I mean, even in coming on to this like second year of the network, I am just now realizing that there are team members that now I'm responsible for and that I want to support, and that it's bigger than just me doing this fun side project with my friend Brad. It's become this whole group of people that now I'm really invested in how this thing grows because I care about you guys and I want it to go well, which adds a little bit more fire under my feet to make sure that then we're doing the best job that we can. So let's talk a little bit about the Daily Leader. I could talk about and introduce what I think the Daily Leader is, but since you're here, I think you guys should tell us what the Daily Leader podcast is, maybe where it is now, and then just a little bit of where you hope that it will go in this next year.
I mean, what the Daily Leader has been is in-depth conversations about leadership, focusing on, kind of our core values of curiosity, community, competence, and clarity. I mean, that on the basic level, that's really what it is. Brad and I set out with a mission of going, actually, we kind of said, who the heck would listen to us? Like, why would you ever tune into us? But we know a lot of people that have led us on our journeys. And I wonder what it would be like to bring them on and listen to them and hear their wisdom and how they've gotten to where they are. So season 1, if anybody goes back and listens, some just fantastic interviews with some incredible CEOs, entrepreneurs, people that are running their own, ministries and have for 40 years, some people that are starting brand new businesses, kind of a whole big gamut of, just a wide spectrum of people that we've brought on. So that has been who we are. And I think turning to 2025, man, a lot of the same and a lot more different. Like, I think Brad and I would both say our core values are really who we are. I love I think it's. Did you watch Ted Lasso, Nikki? Are you a Ted Lasso person?
Oh, yes, of course.
Yes.
I love Ted Lasso.
It
Scott
took
and I
me
both
a year
did.
and a half to
It
get
took
Brad
us a
on
while.
board.
Yeah, we didn't start it until later, and then we flew through every episode. Loved it.
Brad gives me a hard time every day.
It's so good.
About my choices, because he's like, yeah, it's just like that one show you recommended that was terrible, Taylor. But
Look, I'm with you.
Ted in one of my favorite scenes. He actually wrote the scene, I think the language for it, with Brene Brown, and he's playing darts. He's throwing darts, and the guy, kind of the evil dude, the owner of the team, or the old owner, he kind of misses the whole boat that Ted actually is really good at darts, and it's because he didn't stay curious. And at one point he says, hey, there's a quote by Walt Whitman that changed a lot for him, and it said, "Stay curious and not judgmental." And that for me has been super, super challenging and encouraging, to just stay curious about different people in different ways that they lead different companies, cultures, teams, nonprofits, organizations, whatever it is. And so my hope for 2025 is really a lot more of that. And I am a pretty spontaneous person that likes to try different things. I'm actually not that spontaneous when it comes to, I like my consistency, but when we're running the podcast, I'll often be like, Brad, I think we should try something new. And so I'm excited to try some new things. So, and we also, to be fair, we have a plan, hey, we've got our planning meeting coming up where we're going to really dive into more of the nuts and bolts and specifics about what that looks like. But I love interviewing people because I get really tired of my own voice and Brad's, and I hear plenty of that. So anyways, Brad, that's a lot of talking. I don't know. What are your thoughts? What did I miss?
Yeah, no, great on kind of vision, mission, values. I think all of that will remain true. And I can see us maturing the way that we talk about what we do over time and clarifying it a little bit more. I think we have a lot of clarity for year one. And I think that we've stuck to our purpose pretty tightly. The big change that we made late last fall was really wanting to invite people to a deeper level of community, and recognizing that, while we're encouraging people to participate in community, whether that's their local community, the community of their work, their family, however you interpret that, we weren't creating an opportunity for them to do it the way that we really wanted to. And Taylor and I were running and are running independent consultancies that don't, have overlap between clients. I don't even know the names of all of Taylor's clients, and vice versa, right? Let alone, exactly how he's serving them. And just because time constraints, we just don't know. We run our different businesses, right? But we wanted an opportunity to work together with clients and to bring, our individual superpowers together. And so we built a community, and are building the community, because it's still pretty much alpha beta form, where we'll be able to move our listeners from these sort of anonymous ears, wherever they're listening in the world, to a place where they can have, kind of a home digitally, and we can engage them at a much deeper level. And they can go so far as to do coaching with us. They can do relationship building with one another, and plenty of courses and online content that'll be available to them. That'll be original to us, or stuff that we've co-created with some of our guests. And so I think in time, throughout 2025 and into early 2026, we'll have a lot more clarity on what that's going to look like. But yeah, we're trying to do more than just the podcast. And then one final thought that I think is worth sharing is just the point that Taylor's making about a variety of voices, I think is a really important aspect of clarity, which is our last value. And this value, if one were going to get chopped off, this might be the one that you would expect, right? Because it's what's that last C doing down there? Do we really need it? If Shane Kuiper, our friend Shane Kuiper, were here, he'd say, you don't need that. If you've got 4, you've got none, right? But, for us as leaders, clarity means that we can all see something, right? That we can all understand something, that we can all grasp it. And so when we have a variety of voices and a diversity of voices, like we actually create more clarity, and we bring a more clear picture into focus for someone who's trying to understand what leadership is and how it functions. Because at the end of the day, Nikki and Taylor and Brad will all lead contextually. Like we'll lead as me.
Right.
And I can't lead the way Taylor does, and I can't lead the way Nikki does, but I can do a really good job or a really poor job at leading the way that Brad does. And so what we want to help people see is that lived out and expressed. Like the daily leader is not Brad and Taylor telling you how you should lead. It's giving you examples of how many people lead in many contexts for you to learn from in order that you might lead your way better. Mm-hmm. And so I think that we'll continue to really be devoted to bringing a diversity of voices into the conversations that we're having, because it really does serve to create deeper levels of clarity for people, because they're hearing similar things from different people.
Well, that's why I'm excited to have you guys here specifically, because when you think about even the context of this audience, the More with Nikki Dutton audience, I'm so lucky that I've had some of these. They're mostly my friends, okay? But most of them that have been listening, some of them have been here since the very beginning, since October 2020. And then, it grows and you start to pull more people in, and then you start to meet people that you don't have any overlapping circles with, but somehow they found this show and they find some sense of belonging here, some sense of resonance. When they hear my stories or guest stories, they can see themselves in those places. And why I was excited to have you guys here today is because I think sometimes my audience at first glance may not know if they see themselves in the daily leader, because you guys have these people who have these huge companies and do all these things and can sometimes be a very specific type of driven leader. But something that I know all three of us believe in is that leadership is happening with everyone in your context, whether you intend or not. Like there is leadership that is happening, and it may be good leadership, it may be bad leadership. We're all receiving leadership in some form or fashion. But then I would say that I would argue that all of us actually have opportunities to lead as well. If that's in our families with our, mom, dad, brother, sister, if it's in our families, a lot of the audience that listens to this show, their families are growing, they're having kids for the first time. Or I know a lot of the listeners on this show also are working on teams and in churches and in marketing firms and places. And there's just so much opportunity there. So I think it would be helpful to hear, and this is a little bit of a curveball for you guys, but how would you define leadership maybe for someone who doesn't fit your typical target audience? What would they find at the daily leader, and how would that fit them if maybe they don't necessarily always see themselves reflected in that type of, strong CEO, entrepreneur? A lot of the people listening may not view themselves as an entrepreneur. So how would you, I guess, pitch that vision for leadership to someone new?
That's such a great question. Yeah, I was actually hoping you were going to eagerly jump in and
I asked Corey Carlson the same question. I had Corey Carlson on, and he was talking about all this cool stuff, and I was like, yeah, what about for a young mom or something? And he was like, I haven't thought about that. I should probably think about that. I was like, yeah, it's just a different context. Yeah.
And I'm left in awe. And Taylor can attest to this, especially with watching Janelle become a mother of twins. I was going to say, I think
about Becca and Janelle a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And not only do they have to sort of put up with us in some ways, right? And I do think we are supportive husbands and fathers. I would give myself at least a B as a husband and dad. I wouldn't give myself an A, but I'm definitely average or better, right? And I put a lot of effort into being a husband and dad. Right. And I had a very, very incredible father who modeled that for me in a really great way. And so I kind of know when I'm slacking, because I'm like, oh, I never saw my dad not do this. So I better show up.
Yeah.
If he can do it, I better show up. Right. And having said that, I'm left in awe right, at what I see Becca do, because the way that she loves our children and the way that she loves me is remarkable, and it's moving, and it's extraordinarily sacrificial. And I notice oftentimes that, like, when I compare the level of sacrifice that I make to what I see Becca making, like, occasionally I'm embarrassed because I'm like, I would never do that. And Becca like eagerly does. And I'm just like, that's like, I need to really reconsider what my priorities are. And then sometimes I'm just moved and humbled by the fact that, like, she would be willing to forego some of the things that she chooses not to do, or, you know, she could approach her role as a wife and mother in many ways and chooses to approach it in a very sacrificial way. And so I think leadership in the home, more so than anything that I can pinpoint, more so than like even providing, which is like what I see as being like my role number one as a husband and father, especially because like the way that we arrange our home economics is like literally like like it's my like that's
where the money's coming into the house.
Yeah, it's like it was like, hey, which one of us is going to go make money? You are.
Yeah, the risk conversation is all there, and there's mortgage and groceries that have to be bought every day.
Right. Yeah. And she's like, hey, dude, like, that's your thing. Like, go get that money. So all this to say, the word that comes to mind is sacrifice, right? So if I'm defining leadership at home as a wife and mother, like, first and foremost, am I leading my family through sacrifice? And then another word that comes to mind would be like nurture, which, you know, these two words are not words that come up a lot when we're talking about leadership with business leaders. That's not to say that they aren't there. It's just to say that we talk about them in very stale corporate terms, right? We talk about them in ways that are subtly different. But I think about nurture being another key thing that I watch my wife do on a day-to-day basis, that I just am like blown away at, like, her empathy, her ability to listen, her ability to ask really good questions, her ability to like teach our children to breathe and calm themselves and like actually articulate their thoughts and their feelings. Whereas, like, I know how to steamroll really well. Like, I'm very gifted at that part, right? I know how to like raise my voice and be boisterous and commanding, but to nurture like my children and to steward their emotions is radically challenging for me. And I see her do it with what to me appears to be like total ease. Right. And so, I mean, I would offer those two things for like a stay-at-home mom or a stay-at-home dad who feels disconnected from maybe some of the traditional sort of like corporate driven, sports driven, government sort of leadership that we see on display all the time. And I would say, if you can measure those in your life in some sort of qualitative way, like, you can ask yourself, well, how have I been sacrificial for the people in my home? How have I been nurturing to those two people? Insofar as you've done that, you have been a leader, and probably a pretty good one, honestly.
Yeah. And an important one for sure.
That's good.
Sorry, that was long-winded. Well. That was long-winded, but
you don't have to apologize. It's all good. It's all good. Neither of you have to apologize for being long-winded here or there. I
received the apology. I received that.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm just going to only hope the audience does.
Yeah. Well, if they're still listening, they're still here.
Yeah. You know, it's a great question, Nikki. I think somebody listening that's like, hey, I'm not a CEO. I don't run a church. I don't have my own business. I don't leadership is at its core influence. Yeah. Like, it's just influence. And so leadership in business is influence for results. What results do I want to get by the influence that I have on other people? And in a little bit of the same way, influence and leadership is still the same at home. It just looks a little bit different. But like Brad was talking about, the influence that Becca has on the kids is incredible. And that is leadership. And I am always influencing myself, and I'm always influencing others. Always, 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 always. It's just which direction and how. So for me, like the guidance that I've gotten from my wife, guys, our kids, they've gotten better, but they'd wake up, and no matter what time
Taylor has
up,
twins, by the way. I don't know if we've mentioned that yet. Twins that are under a year old. Yeah.
They're coming up on 10 months here in 5 days.
Yes.
And they've just recently, well, one of them slept well for a number of months. The other one has not, and still loves to wake up at 3 a.m. and just play, just in her bed.
Just having fun.
Yeah, she's having a good old time. She just sits straight up. Whatever the heck you're doing, girl, good for you. But Janelle, every morning, like I'm exhausted. I don't know about you guys. When I get up at like 6 a.m. or 5:30, whatever time I get up, I'm tired. I don't want to talk to anybody yet. I haven't woke up. Janelle is committed to making sure that those girls wake up with somebody happy and excited to see them every morning, like every morning. That's influence. You have to influence yourself first to make that choice, and then you get to influence somebody else. So you are having an impact. So, I think if you were to come on to our show and go, hey, this doesn't apply to me, I go, actually, it really does, because at its core, we're all just humans. So we're taking some stuff that actually is for humans, but humans in maybe a corporate world or a nonprofit world. But all those things, they're still true. It's how do I be healthy? How do I influence myself? How do I influence others? Like that's it. And that's our call. And if you are a follower of Jesus and you listen to this, like that is our call. That's what he's asked us to do. He's asked us to love ourselves, and then love others. I almost reverse those, but love God first, I guess, is what he says. But then, like love ourselves and love others. That's literally what leadership is. If you want to break it down, that influence is just, hey, how do I take what has been given to me here and give it out this way? So.
Yeah, I would echo that for sure. I think when I asked the question knowing what I would offer as an answer if I was answering from your team, because I feel like I'm a part of your team and I want as many listeners to join the Daily Leader as possible. And I want that because I actually think that it would be beneficial. I don't like recommending things that are just to fill space or whatever. The way that I view it is so similar. I think that when we're thinking about leadership, it really is a human issue. It's not about, when you really strip it down, it's about how are we interacting as humans for the good of whatever we're working towards or whatever's happening around us, the world around us. And when I listen to the Daily Leader, I could not feel more different than some of the guests that you have, because they are these like well-established CEOs of multiple companies. But I hear them talk about attachment styles, and that's interesting to me. Or I hear them talk about how fear plays into the decisions that they've made. Or I hear them talk about the mistakes that they've made as they've been leading. And even though the context is different, the content is so relatable. I actually can see myself in that and think about whether I'm at home or with my friends or in my relationships or working. I think about even being in a mid-level management position, and how do you lead from the middle up? How do you lead when you're not in that upper leadership role? Those have been a lot of questions that I've had in my career so far. And I find inspiration and I find some solutions and some ideas from the conversations that I'm hearing on the Daily Leader, where you have people who have occupied all of those different roles and all of those different places. And so at the end of the day, leadership is a people-centered thing. And we are all people trying to just live the best life that we can in the slice of life that we've been given. And so I think that you will find, if you're listening, I think that you will find yourself in these conversations, like I said, even if the context looks a little bit different. So I knew that I would bail you guys out at the end, even if you gave really bad answers, which you didn't actually. So
They were B's.
No, they were amazing. Yeah. They were amazing. And
7.
Truly, Janelle and Becca, they're my next ones. I'm going to get them to come on. They'll do the Daily Leader Part 2. The Daily Leader After Dark is what Janelle and Becca will do.
Wow.
They'll come and they'll give the real answers.
Yeah.
We'll ask them what it's actually like to live with you guys,
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. Good luck. Yeah.
I'm telling you, it's a B. We're solid B's as husbands and fathers. Like we're not
which I will take.
The best, but we're definitely not bad. I mean, we're putting forth the effort.
That's right. There's some intentionality there.
Yeah.
Okay, well, my last question for you is one that you guys actually answered on a recent episode that you did, and I thought it was such a great question. And it kind of comes back to the Daily Leader and just the podcast specifically. why is it worth it to spend all this time and all this money and all this effort in something that sometimes you don't get those numerical results that you're looking for, especially in the podcast world? Success is so fluid, and I think achievement is so fluid in the podcast space. So why are you guys doing a season 2, and what is keeping you going?
Yeah, that's a good one. Is it me now, Brad? Because I threw you
it's
under the
definitely
bus.
your turn. Definitely your turn to start here.
I don't remember what I said on the other episode, so we'll see how it goes. I mean, why is it worth it for me? Well, I kind of almost go back to Brad's question, like, what if we didn't do it this last year? Like, what if I didn't do it? What would I have missed out on? And I would have missed out on a lot. Like, we had some really, like, it is interesting because I feel like every episode for me, I'm learning something. Like, we can go all the way back to Josiah, who is episode number 2, technically.
An early one, yeah.
Early episode, right? And I play tennis on Wednesdays. And he's, Brad laughs because I bring it into sports every time. But I play tennis, and I think about it every point that I can remember. I'm like, okay, just focus on this as the mission. I don't need to win the game. I don't need to. This is my next critical mission. Like, this is it. And like, those things have stuck with me for, this is an entire year. We filmed that a year ago. And I still remember that. I still remember that Shane Kuiper said, fear will mobilize us, but it will never sustain us.
Yeah.
I still remember Justin Benson saying, hey, look, I'm an avalanche rider. I got to learn how to ride the avalanche. I still remember, my dad pulling out his leadership tree and going, this is what I do. This is what I believe in. Like, there are countless examples. So that's reason A. Reason B, oh gosh, I hate giving you credit. Brad, I like working with Brad. I have for a long time, and I think we have a good time together. And so for me, it's worth it. No, those are both self-centered things. The other thing is, I hope that somewhere out there, and I think, Nikki, you helped us see this today. Like, I really do. My hope is always that people can come on, they can listen to our show, and they can be better for something that they heard. Like, I kind of see it as a buffet. So take what you want and leave what you don't. But hopefully that's a blessing and an encouragement to your life. And that pushes them towards community, that pushes them towards being a better version of themselves, to influencing themselves and others better. So those are kind of my thoughts.
Yes, I totally agree with everything you just said, Taylor. It is a lot of fun to work with you. And, it was actually your idea to start a podcast. I was just the one who
it's true.
Was like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to then. And then it was Taylor's idea. It was like, hey, we're going to start a podcast. And I was like, no, you're going to try to make me watch Ted Lasso and talk about Ted Lasso. And, like, you're going to talk about sports all the time. I don't know anything about sports. And then he was like, no, we're going to start a podcast. And then like 6 months later, I was like, hey, I started a podcast and you're my co-host. And here we are. And so I think that it's just recognizing that, like, we all have a role to play in solving the problem of terrible, horrific leadership and the damage that it creates around our lives in and every day. Like, remember back to, like, the friend in your life who had terrible parents, who were neglectful and immature and irresponsible and self-centered, right? Think back to, like, a kid you grew up with who just had terrible parents. And, like, the damage that created in that person's life, right? Think back to your worst boss, and or maybe just the worst coach, the coach that you had who was just grouchy and just had no joy and had no encouragement. To think back to some of the political leaders that you've seen in the last year and how they've engaged the public square, right? Or I could probably say the last day, and I'm sure that the Twitter feed is full of interesting things, right? We're trying to recognize that, like, we have a role to play in helping bad leaders understand that there's a better vision for this, right? There's something beyond what they were shown and just what works in the immediate, moment or quarter. And We just live in a world where bad leadership is modeled, where it's accepted and it's tolerated. And we have to have enough compassion in our hearts and enough responsibility and ownership to recognize that like we have a role to play in solving that problem. And I, believe that poor leadership is the problem of our world. Like it's not global warming, although that's bad. It's not plastic, although you should probably stop drinking plastics all the time and eating plastics all the time. But like really the deeper issue is that like bad leaders create bad worlds and bad outcomes. And so how do we have the compassion and the care to show people a better way? Mm-hmm. And so for me, it's worth it. And it's, it doesn't really matter what the cost is, as long as I can, feed my family and do the right things, and be responsible, which I probably am blurring the lines there on some days. Right. But it's worth it to be in service of that mission and to be used in that way. Yeah. And to kind of get to the other side of this life and say, hey, you know what? I know that I helped some people be the best version of themselves and contribute the best way that they could to the one life that they have.
Yeah, I appreciate both of those answers. And like I said, I have the privilege of getting to watch you take steps towards that on a weekly basis at a minimum. But I know that it's happening in moments and it's happening in conversations. And it makes me really excited for what could come next. And it makes me believe even more in what is being built. So I appreciate you guys so much. And I just appreciate you taking so much time and letting me flip the mic a little bit and host you for a change, which is fun. And yeah, like I said, I would invite anyone listening to check out the Daily Leader. And I think one other final thought that I would leave is it just matters to have thoughtful conversations in your life, even if it's with someone that you typically wouldn't ever get to engage with, or an idea or a thought that you've never even considered. Those have been some of the best conversations that I've had. And I feel like podcasts offer those conversations to us as we're going through our life. And so the Daily Leader is full of them. We actually have 50 plus episodes at this point. There are plenty to choose from. Yes. So I just appreciate you guys, and I'm excited to see what happens next.
Thanks.
Thank you, Nikki. We appreciate you. And there would be no Nikki Dutton, no Daily Leader, no more network, no Daily Leader. That's the deal.
Peanut butter and jelly. Yeah, we can't do it without
That's
you.
Right.
They happened together. They were born the same day. So
yeah, indeed.